Good morning, fifth graders. I'm going to read a little bit more from StormRunners. And remember that we're able to read this because of permission from Scholastic, special permission during this pandemic. So I am going to share my screen with you because I want to show you how I would be taking notes on this if I were doing it. So in the first quadrant, you take notes on the story elements, the characters, the setting, the problem. And so far, we have met Chase, Chase's dad, Tomas, Marco Rossi, and sort of Nicole. We've gotten an idea about Nicole. The setting has been Chase's house, the setting has been out on the road, and now they're arriving at the farm. Some of the problems, and there's more problems than this, but our dad was struck by lightning, mom and sister died, dad sold the house and just kind of put them into the car to go. Well, now we're moving into the second quadrant, and in the second quadrant, we talk a lot about ideas that are repeated. So some of the ideas that are repeated right now are the idea of time, that Chase's dad tries to guess the time, that all the chapter headings start with time. And then there are things that you expect to be usual, but they're actually very unusual. So for example, it's a farm, but it's not your average regular farm. Okay, so I want you to be looking for repeated ideas, and then I want you to see what else we can add to quadrant 1 here with the characters, the setting, and the problem. So we are at 5:02 p.m. Not sure if you can see that because of the glare. Chase followed Nicole onto the screen porch of the Rossi's old farmhouse. He looked at the sofas and chairs scattered about and wondered what it would be like to sit there in the evening, listening to lion tamers, clowns, acrobats, and little people talking about their day. To get through the front door, they had to move several boxes of framed newspaper articles, photos, and other circus memorabilia to the side. Where is she moving all this stuff? We have a waterproof storage container out back by the pool. Nicole led the way into the large kitchen where the counters, cupboards, and appliances were at least 2 feet lower than they'd normally be. Mama Rossi, gray-haired and a bit shorter than her son, stood at the sink peeling sweet potatoes. Sitting next to the sink was a small green monkey wearing a diaper. Are you getting used to the fact that there are going to be surprising things everywhere? He was holding a potato peel in one hand and scratching his leg with the other. Mama Rossi turned around and gave them a bright smile. She put her hand out. "You must be Chase Masters. Welcome to our home." "Thank you." Chase took her hand. Mama Rossi stared at him with dark eyes, and her smile faded. "I'm so sorry about your mother and sister." Chase froze. "What are you talking about?" Nicole asked. Mama Rossi gripped Chase's hand more tightly. "A car accident on the mountain. I'm sure it hasn't been easy for you or your father." Tomas must have told Arturo, Chase thought. But looking into Mama Rossi's dark eyes, he had an eerie feeling that wasn't how she knew. Now, this book, remember, as we get into fifth grade text, it gets more complicated, and this book has a flashback. So we're flashing back even further than Chase in the treehouse. We're flashing back to 2 years earlier. It had rained every day Chase had been at Boy Scout camp, and it was still raining. He was standing in the parking lot with his troop leader, Mr. Murphy. All morning, one by one, parents had been picking up their drenched scouts. Now it was just Chase and Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy looked at his watch for the 100th time. "Are you sure your parents were clear on when and where to pick you up?" "Yes, sir. Like I told you, I talked to them last night. Mom said that they were driving up with my little sister. On the way home, we're going to stop by our cabin and pick up a load of firewood for the house." "Maybe they stopped at the cabin first." "I don't think so. Dad wouldn't haul a truckload of wood all the way up here, then drive it back down the mountain." "You're probably right. Do you have a phone at your cabin?" "No." Mr. Murphy pulled his cell out and called Chase's house and his parents' cell again. All 3 calls went to voicemail. Chase was starting to feel sick. His parents were never late for anything. "We can't stand here all day waiting," Mr. Murphy said. "How about if I leave a note for them here and voicemails on their phones saying I've taken you to my house?" "Okay." Chase tossed his soggy gear into the back of Mr. Murphy's SUV. About halfway down the mountain, they ran into a terrible traffic jam. Chase was so worried about his parents not showing up that he barely noticed the line of cars stretching ahead of them until they reached the end of it. On the opposite side of the highway, at least half a dozen police cars with flashing lights clustered on the shoulder. A tow truck was winching a blue SUV out of a ditch. Winching is when they hook that hook to it and pull it up with a winch. "That's my parents' car," Chase shouted. "Are you still a Boy Scout?" Mama Rossi asked. "What?" Chase pulled his hand away from Mama Rossi quickly. "Are you okay?" Nicole asked. "Yeah, I just, I asked if you were still a Boy Scout," Mama Rossi repeated. "No, we've been traveling," he said. "Helping people," Mama Rossi said. Chase nodded, but he knew it wasn't exactly true. At that moment, John Masters and Tomas were trolling separate parts of St. Petersburg. John was driving through the business district. Tomas was driving through the wealthier residential areas. If a business or a homeowner, never a contractor, was out making preparations for the storm, they'd stop, introduce themselves, then offer to give them a hand for free. Tomas's poor English was not a hindrance. His skilled hands transcended all language barriers. Both men knew how to precisely prepare a home or business for a disaster. They were fast and efficient. They also knew that if the wind was strong enough, no preparation was going to save an expensive building or home from damage. The grateful owner usually tried to pay them for their time, but they refused. Instead, they handed over a couple of MD Emergency Services business cards and told the owners to call if they had any problems. If the winds were strong enough and the water was high enough, they would all have problems, and they would call. But the second round of repairs wouldn't be free. So that was how they advertised their business, was that they would go to the wealthier parts of town and they would help the people in their houses. They would help them get their house all ready for the storm. But then when the storm did all that damage, people would remember how helpful they were and would call them to do the repairs. And Chase is not sure how he feels about that. 5:07 p.m. Nicole picked up a paring knife from the counter. "I suppose you want some help peeling sweet potatoes." "Since they're your sweet potatoes," Mama Rossi said, "you're right, I want help. And what about your laps?" She put her hands on her hips and tried to look mad, but there was a sparkle in her eyes. "You did about half of what you were supposed to do." "I did enough. The meet is in 3 days. I don't want to wear myself out before the competition. I was feeding Gertrude and the cats, so Dad didn't have to." "All right," Mama Rossi said, "because we have a guest and because we have a lot to do, I'll let it go this time." "Scoot, you peel thief," Nicole said. Poco had grabbed another potato peel and climbed to the top of the refrigerator. He glared down at her. "Make yourself at home," Mama Rossi said to Chase. "This could take a while. Nicole is a very fast swimmer, but a very slow potato peeler." "Very funny, Mama." "I can move those boxes if you want," Chase offered. "That would be nice," Mama Rossi said, "but it might not be as easy as you think. For one thing, I'm not certain there's room in the container. Marco and Nicole haven't done a very good job of packing. The boxes need to be reorganized and restacked." "No problem." After a year of shack and shop duty, Chase was an expert organizer. How many of you have moved a lot or moved things around and you're good at stacking boxes? We moved a lot when I was a kid and I got good at that. Nicole put the knife down. "Since you're blaming me for the mess, maybe I better give him a hand." "I think Chase is more than capable of hauling and organizing boxes on his own, and I need you to make the sweet potato pie, unless you'd prefer for Chase to eat my version." Nicole laughed. "I guess that wouldn't be polite to our guest." Mama Rossi snapped a towel at her playfully. "I'm not exactly your guest," Chase said. It wasn't a rule, but they didn't usually hang out with the people who owned the property they parked on. "We have everything we need in the fifth wheel. You don't need to feed me." "Nonsense," Mama Rossi said. "I don't know how to cook for less than a dozen people, and with you there's only 4 of us tonight." "I wouldn't argue with Mama Rossi," Nicole said. "Dad tried to talk her out of getting the container. Guess who won?" The container is like those things that are parked by the side of the road that you put things in, or sometimes people build a container shed out on their property to store things in. It's a storage container. He'll be happy our things are safe. Do you like sweet potato pie, Chase? I like pie, and I like sweet potatoes, but I've never had them together. You haven't lived until you've eaten Nicole's sweet potato pie. Chase carried 2 boxes past a large modern pool, which did not fit with the old 2-story farmhouse. The Rossis must have put it in long after the house was built for Nicole to swim laps. The container, which was nothing more than a steel box welded to a trailer, was on the opposite side of the pool. He opened the door and a storage carton fell out. There was plenty of room inside the container, but it looked like it had been organized by Poco. The only way to fix it was to take everything out and start all over again. Chase looked up at the sky. Clouds were moving in from the Gulf. He jogged down to the shop, imitating Tomas's perpetual state of emergency, which is exactly what Chase would be in if it started to rain after he pulled everything out. Imagine that if he pulled out all these boxes and then it started to rain on them. He grabbed a couple of tarps, a hammer, and a handful of metal stakes. Since they'd been on the road, his father had taken the Boy Scouts motto, "Be prepared," to a new level. Every job, no matter how small, needed to be thought through before it was started, from beginning to end, with particular attention paid to what might go wrong in between. Chase staked out a ground tarp so it wouldn't blow away. Then he staged a second tarp to pull over the boxes in case it started to rain. What he had neglected to anticipate in between was his curiosity about the Rossi family and their circus. In almost every box, he found something he had to look at or to read. There were stacks of photo albums filled with pictures of the big top, circus acts, and animals and people. Nicole's mom was a little person like Mama Rossi and Marco. Others in the family were regular size like Nicole. But in every photo, they were smiling and laughing as if there wasn't an inch of difference between them. Marco walked up as Chase was staring at a painting of a man holding a whip, dressed in a red coat, white pants, knee-high black boots, and a black top hat. That's my great-grandfather, Riccardo Rossi. He was a famous ringmaster in Europe before he came over here to start his own circus. This picture doesn't show his stature in perspective very well. Stature is a word that means how tall you are. He was 4 inches shorter than I am. He died when I was 5 years old. He was 96. The day before he died, he was in the ring training a stallion. Wow. Yep, he was quite a guy. Marco looked at the tarp and boxes. Did Mama Rossi give you this chore? No, Chase said. I offered to help. I'm supposed to be organizing and repacking everything, but I guess what I was mostly doing was snooping. Marco laughed. It's hard not to. There's a lot of interesting history here. He reached into one of the boxes and pulled out a photograph of a man sitting on top of an elephant. This is my dad. He was killed by an elephant when I was 13. He was quite a guy, too. I'm sorry. Thanks. It was a long time ago, but I still miss him. Some things you just don't get over, I guess. Chase understood all too well. He'd wondered if he was ever going to get over the deaths of his mom and Monica. But you still like elephants? They're my favorite animals. They were my dad's favorite, too. Marco looked at the container. Do you think this will do the trick? It's not really waterproof, Mr. Rossi, Chase answered. First, it's Marco, not Mr. Rossi. Second, can you waterproof it? Your dad said you were pretty handy. I can caulk it and tarp it, which should keep the water out, but I think the boxes would be a lot safer back in the house. Not according to my mother, Marco said. She's convinced the house is coming down. What do you think? I don't agree with her on this, but she's my mother, and she's usually right. Chase nodded. She was certainly right about the accident and about his being a Boy Scout. Did Arturo tell you anything about us? Like what? Our past, where we're from. All he said was that you help people during storms and that you needed a place to hook up your rigs. Is there something else I should know? Chase shook his head. I guess not. I better get down to Pet and see what she's up to. Thanks for taking care of the container. I'll see you at dinner. It took Chase nearly 2 hours to reload the container. When he finally got the last box inside, he caulked all the seams, threw the tarps over the top, and began securing them with bungee cords. Nicole came out of the back door of the house as he was stretching the last cord. Why so many bungees? She asked. Bungees are those stretchy things. They're like big, thick rope that's like a rubber band with hooks on the end, and you hook it from one side to the other, and he put tarps over it and hooked it over to keep the water out. Why so many bungees? Nicole asked. So it doesn't float to the sun. Funny. It looks like a giant Christmas present wrapped in blue paper. It won't leak. I'll say. How's the sweet potato pie? It's perfect. Chase smiled. I suppose anyone who scratches lions under the chin is entitled to a certain amount of confidence. I better go down to the shack and get cleaned up before dinner. Hurry, Nicole said. Sweet potato pie is terrible when it's cold. As Chase was drying his hair in the shack's kitchen, he realized that they didn't have a single photograph hanging up from either his former or his current life. How can that be? Where are the photos of Mom and Monica? The notebooks with Monica's stories and drawings? They weren't in the fifth wheel or the semi-trailer. Chase knew exactly what they had and where all of it was stored. What has Dad done with our past? So I'm going to see if I can get the arrow here. And I want to talk about here quadrant 1. Quadrant 1, we're looking for story elements. So the characters so far are Chase, his dad, Tomas, Nicole, and Marco Rossi. And I want you to think about one thing about each of them, okay? And then we also have that we were introduced to Mama Rossi, okay? And Mama Rossi gets feelings about things, and her granddaughter said she can tell the future and sometimes the past. So she's thinking that there's going to be a storm and that the storm is going to come right through there. And Chase's dad, who has studied all the weather, is saying, no, it's not going to be anywhere near here. So I wonder who's going to be right. The setting started out in Chase's house, and then they were on the road, and now they are, oops, sorry, I grabbed the wrong thing here. They are at the Rossi farm, which is the winter quarter for a circus. And one of the most exciting things that we read about before is they have an elephant there who's about to give birth. So the problems that are happening so far, Chase's dad was struck by lightning, his mom and sister died, his dad sold the house. There are probably more problems than these. These are just some I'm pointing out. He doesn't feel very close to his dad. His dad leaves him on his own. Okay. And now we also have the problem of where will the storm come? Is Mama Rossi going to be right, or is Chase's dad going to be right? Now, some of the repeated ideas in quadrant 2, the second part of the story, is time, gets repeated over and over again, and also unusual things. It's not a farm, it's a circus farm. Okay, so things are not always quite the way they seem at the Rossi farm. So I will read to you again soon, and I hope you have a lovely afternoon.